Okay, we're live. Welcome to all hundreds of you watching on Facebook and YouTube, and the several of you here at the Jewish Experience with us. Thank you for coming. Before I begin, if anyone didn't sign in yet, we have a sign in over there. On your way out, you could just sign in. We also have a fancy QR code, so if you want to, it's pretty cool. Just scan your camera there, and it lets you pay. I think most of you are what we call Jew Pro Trekkers. If anyone wants to join and become a monthly giver, all these programs are on the house, so to speak. So besides that, I wanted to just a couple announcements. This week on Shabbos we have our Shalosh Sushis program. That'll be here. I believe that's at 6, so I got some sushi, so you can sign up online. And then we have for Shavuos, stay tuned, we're gonna have a dinner at our house, a catered dinner. Might actually not be at our house, but stay tuned, it's gonna be a catered dinner. And then all night learning, so that's Sunday night. Take off work the next day, we're gonna have a program the whole night. You can study, there'll be some classes, some discussions, whatever you want, a lot of desserts. Should be a good time, so stay tuned for info on that as well. Okay, without further ado, I do want to dedicate tonight's learning to the memory of the 45 precious souls who were horrifically, tragically killed at a celebration during Lag BaOmer in Meron. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Meron before, but it is where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great rabbi of the Talmud, is buried, and there's a long tradition to ascend to his grave, to his gravesite on the anniversary of his death, his yortzeit, which is Lag BaOmer. So over the years, tens of thousands of Jews go there to celebrate on Meron. There like bonfires and celebrate and dance and sing and And I remember actually 15 years ago I went and it was one of the most profound, powerful experiences. I remember I think when I was there was 300,000 to 400,000 Jews just celebrating together. And it was special to see Jews of all backgrounds. Really, no two people look the same. And everyone had different philosophies, different approaches to their Judaism, but we were all celebrating as Jews together. And that's what it's been over the years. So it's just very tragic that, on a day in which we actually celebrate on Lag BaOmer, there's a terrible plague, and that's why I'm growing out the beard here, is we're in a period of mourning that starts from right after Passover until Lag BaOmer. 24,000 of Rabbi Akiva's students died because they didn't properly respect each other, and they stopped dying. The plague stopped on Lag BaOmer. So it's a day of life. It's not a day of death, and it's just very tragic and confusing and difficult that so many people died, so many young people who, some of whom were spending a gap year after high school, before college, learning in Israel. Americans, I think there was Argentinians, people from all over the world, they died. And it's a very, very, very difficult time for us. And we believe that, not that their lofty souls, I'm sure, are doing just fine, but we do believe in the eternity of the soul. And we believe that when we do things like study, it elevates their souls. So it's appropriate, actually, because it's common at a shiva, when a person mourns and they spend 7 days in mourning, the first 7 days, it's customary to actually learn a Mishnah in honor of the deceased, in honor of those who passed. The reason for that, some explain, is because Mishnah, the word Mishnah, which is again what we've been learning, Pirkei Avos, if you change around the letters, it actually can be spelled neshama, which is soul. So when you learn Mishnah, it has a powerful ability to elevate the soul. So God willing, our learning today can be a merit for their lofty souls. And it's interesting, we'll see how much time we have. But potentially, I highlighted a couple different Mishnayos I want to learn from Pirkei Avos, but one of them, I think, actually has, a pretty powerful lesson in the awesomeness of the Jewish community, and I think it relates to this tragedy as well. So I'm just trying to find it really quick. Yes. So the great Hillel said, and it's actually interesting because this time of year, especially when Rabbi Akiva students had died because they didn't properly respect each other. So the Talmud tells us, we actually read a few weeks ago, that you have to love your fellow like you love yourself. Rabbi Akiva said that's a klal gadol b'Torah. That's a huge principle in the Torah, to love your fellow like you love yourself. The Talmud relates actually that there was someone who wanted to convert, and they came to Hillel and they said, "Convert me, while I'm standing on one leg. Just sum it up for me." So he said very simply, he said, that which you don't like when other people do to you, don't do that to other people. The rest is commentary, go learn. And the rabbis explained that's the same idea of caring for each other like we care for ourselves. Do to them what we want for ourselves, and the converse of that is don't do to them what we wouldn't want for ourselves. So the same Hillel, and shout out, we have a Hillel director here with us tonight. So Hillel's a big, big figure. And he said the following. He said, Al tifrosh min hatzibur, which means don't separate from the community. And then he says, Val tamin ba'atzmecha ad yom moscha, don't believe in yourself until the day that you die. We'll have to explain what that means. And he says, Val taden es chaverecha ad shetagia limkomo, don't judge your friend until you're in his place. You've reached his place. And he says, Val tomar davar she'iyav shal lishmoa, don't say something that is impossible to hear, that you don't want to be heard. Because in the end it will be heard. And then he says, then he also says, don't say that when I get free time, then I'll study, then I'll learn, then I'll do it, because maybe you won't have that free time to end up going to do what you wanted to do. So I want to kind of break this down piece by piece, and we'll see if we have time for another one, or we'll just leave it here. There's definitely a lot here. So the first piece that he says here is do not separate from the community. So I guess the question is, what does that mean? What does that mean not to separate from the community? And the next question would be, why wouldn't one separate from the community? So anyone have any approach here? What it means not to separate yourself from the community? Like, does that mean, what does that mean exactly? Like, and if they're all going to a fundraiser, like you should also go because you don't want to separate. Like, what does that mean exactly?
Or like your support network.
Okay, you want a big support network of your community. Yeah, very good. Very good.
Your family.
Your family.
This is like more than community. It's like home base. It's people who have shared in the same traumas.
Oh, okay. So you're actually very good. You're picking up to what some of the commentaries say. Excellent. Good. Alex, as if she wrote the commentary. I just put this away. We have Alex's commentary. Very good. We're going to get there. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think kind of like what you all are saying, that there's actually community is a very important thing. And we're very blessed in the Jewish community that's like, it's a big focus for us. It is, for those who are not aware, actually, over, the last several thousand years, typically Jews all lived kind of in the same community. That was based, I think, because they had to live near the synagogues because until, a couple hundred years ago, it was common that, most of the folks were, strictly observing Shabbos. So there was no, I guess they didn't have cars back then, but people were walking to synagogue. And in order to go to the synagogue, you had to be close. So what that meant is everyone lived in the same radius, in the same area. Happens to be right now, we're sitting in one of the three communities in the three, I guess, three designated spaces of the Jewish communities. We have this thing called an Eruv, where you actually have to carry items on Shabbos, and that's kind of how I think of the different communities. There's actually one in Aurora as well. The Bukharian Jewish community lives as well. So there's a number of communities here. We're on what's called the East Side. But there's this idea of not separating from the community. And I can just tell you personally, for me, it was very powerful. One way that we have community in Jewish life is around the synagogue. This is not a shameless plug for, I recently started, being a rabbi at a minyan in town here on Shabbos, BMHPJ, the Mechitza Minyan, Shari Simcha. You're all invited every week. But But the synagogue actually has been an amazing sense of community for me personally, especially looking back at this past year. So the way that it worked was that obviously in March, everything shut down, synagogue as well, which to me was it was just so foreign, that concept. And then if you look actually in Jewish texts, there's a precedent for this when pandemics and epidemics have come, that everything shut down previously as well. But the truth is, when things started slowly improving and things were becoming legal with distance and stuff, a lot of the synagogues here in this part of town actually reopened. I know for myself, I think a number of people have only recently kind of literally just come out and started like seeing people. But for myself, life has pretty much been back to normal since last June, when I was going to synagogue every day, several times a day, and being a part of that community in that way. So there's something very comforting and special about a community, even as the world is going kind of, the world it's just such a crazy world, with pandemic and shutdowns and isolation. It was pretty powerful, and you should be aware. We were very safe in the synagogue. It was designated, I think, one person per table. Each table, I kid you not, in my synagogue had literally 5 hand sanitizers on it. So each, every 10 minutes, I just switch to a different hand sanitizer. I get a nice variety there, and so it was pretty cool. I'm choosing this guy. Okay. Oh, no, okay. Yeah, that's Mordy. Okay, cool. He's trying to get in. I don't know if he's trying to get in. Okay. Anyways, but as Alex was alluding to, the Bartanura is there's actually an amazing wine named after him. The Rav Ovadia Bartanura has a commentary on the Mishnah, and he relates the following idea about what it means, why it's so important to be part of a community. And he says, the reason that you should not separate from the community is rather you should join with their suffering. So called Porish min hatzibur, because he says anyone who separates from the community, they don't see the comfort of the community when things turn around and get better. So it's kind of interesting, because again, I would have thought don't separate from the community because we need the support, we need friendship, we need people with similar values in our lives, socialization. But the first thing he says is, do not separate from the community, because rather, join in them in their sorrow, which is kind of like a sad depiction of this. The example I like to give, where this helped connect it for me, it's kind of a silly example, and then we're going to get a lot more serious. But it helped me understand this, so I guess it was valuable. When I lived in New York, nobody cared about the Broncos. Like, no one. It's like, no one, who cares? It's like, they get other things. They hardly care about their own teams, let alone the Broncos. So I'm listening in Albany, to the talk radio, trying to get, some news on the Broncos. Well, there's no news. It's all, no one cares. So when the Broncos lost the Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks, terrible game, awful. It was kind of a bummer for me because no one got it. I wasn't able to commiserate with anyone, not on the radio, not in person. No one cared. And then when I moved to Denver, and then it was great the first year they won, but then things soured pretty quickly. It's like whenever they lost and I was frustrated after a game, I just listened to the radio the next morning. Like everyone got me, and that was like, I felt, it felt nice to be on the same page with people. So that obviously it's a silly example there, but just to get serious now is that there's something just very powerful about when we look at what happened, and that we're part of a community where the entire Jewish people feel this. We feel the pain of what happened, and I was very moved actually on TikTok. I saw a Israeli soccer player. That's a secular soccer player who played in Spain, and he scored a goal in his game, and then he broke down and got emotional, and he made a 4 and a 5 with his hands for the 45 people who passed away, and I was very moved by that. Here's a player with a vastly different background from the people who died, but he understood that we're all part of one nation and one people, and he felt the pain of that, and millions of Jews across the world, are in pain. We feel the pain over this, and this is something that is very unique and special about our community. Is that when we go through times like this, when there was a horrific, synagogue massacre, we all were together. It didn't matter, what denomination someone was from, what their beliefs were. Like, we were all suffering. We were all in this together, and side by side. And there were very moving videos I saw also at the Kotel, at the Western Wall. Just hundreds and hundreds of people, side by side, singing Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, like we're all brothers, we're all family, and it's interesting, just this concept that when things are tough and you're part of a community, that that standing right behind you, you have a massive group of people that are with you, that are by your side, and you don't have to go through these things alone by yourself. And I think that's very comforting, and I think that's what the Bartanura, this commentary, is picking up here, is that you don't separate from the community, that you have the support and the love of your fellow community members, your fellow Jews. And it's we're approaching Shavuos soon, in a few days, and there's this idea that the way that we were able to receive the Torah, there's a well-known verse in the Torah. It says, right before we received the Torah, it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Hahar, that the Jewish people encamped opposite the mountain. It says Vayichan. Those Hebrew experts, Vayichan is singular tense. We would have said they encamped, which we would expect, given the fact it was the entire nation of Israel. It should have said Vayachanu. They encamped. Am I right? I'm right. Okay. So we checked it out with the Israeli, and I'm right. Okay. So Rashi comments, and the reason it used the singular tense is because we were Ke'ish Echad Belev Echad. We were with one heart. So we were like one person with one heart, and we had that unity. And because we had that unity, we merited, God revealing Himself to the entire Jewish people and giving us the Torah. So this concept, I think, of unity, of being together. Obviously, we live in a time that's very divisive, but if we can try to power through that and kind of just ignore some of those divisions that kind of bother us, maybe that could be a very powerful thing that we can do to commemorate the lives of those who are lost, to unify together, and to feel each other's love at this time, and to, it shouldn't take tragedy to bring us together. So if we're able to learn this lesson and keep this love in our heart for people, even when we forget about the tragedies, but somehow, in the recesses of our heart, to just remember we're all a community, and at the end of the day, we got each other's back. I think that's a very powerful thing that we can and should consider. Okay, so that is the first part. The next line here, it says, "Don't believe in yourself until the day that you die." That's a little, I don't know, depressing. Like, isn't there? You should have, confidence, self-esteem. Should believe in myself. It's kind of strange. Does anyone have any approach? Yes.
Maybe it's talking about like your ego, like to, not. I don't think, like to go through life more humble and not letting yourself get into your head. And,
beautiful. Yeah, excellent. I love that. Yeah.
Maybe also to trust Hashem.
Oh, I like that. So are you saying, don't believe in me, believe in God, trust in God?
Because if you're trying to force your own ego's will, it might not be in line with what Hashem has in plan, and you're just going to consistently end up in these roadblocks.
I love that. I love that. This is like my favorite text to study with people one-on-one, but I don't think, so I've seen this dozens of times, but I never understood it that way. I love that. Yeah, beautiful. That's awesome. And have you guys write the commentary, it'll be good. Yeah.
I think it can also mean don't ever believe that you're done learning and growing.
Oh,
You always have somewhere more to go.
yeah,
Until like, you give someone
100%.
more.
exactly. And exactly. And it says, don't do this until the day of your death, right? So obviously we don't know the day of our death. I think as Kayla was alluding to, that means every day we need to strive to continue growing, strive for more. And it's interesting that the way that it works, our rabbis teach us, is that this world that we're in right now, it's a world of temptation. It's a world of materialism. It's a world where sometimes we have our natural bodily desires which don't align with our spiritual godly desires. And we should never, think in this world that we're there, that we've made it. Now I'm good. Now I don't need to continue my trajectory of growth anymore. Now I'm where I want to be. I'm satisfied there. Because the reality is that, and it's interesting, by the way, because another Mishnah says, who is rich? The one who's happy with what he has. So that implies that we should be content with what we have. And here it sounds like, well, you should always still be striving for more. So you have to think about how that plays out. But I think, this is talking about in the spiritual sense right here, that life, maybe you've heard us say this before, or maybe you've heard someone else say this, but the reality is life is like, it's an escalator that's going down, but you're that little kid trying to climb up. And if you don't keep climbing, the natural gravitational pull of life will bring you down. So it's like the default, it's kind of sad, but the default is if you're not actively working, you're going to fall. As if, you're in a habit of working out and then you stop, like it's going to catch up to you, right? If you're just dormant and I don't know, that's inertia. I don't know what that term means. I heard it maybe a week ago. In our meeting, we heard it, right?
Was it our meeting or was it this last
Was it here? Oh, maybe it was here.
Like an object that rests, things
Yeah.
that rest.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Fine. So there it is. So, see, Mrs. Knowles, I was paying attention. Yeah. Probably not, but she's great, and I hope she watches. She's amazing. Yeah. She's still teaching. You probably had her also, right? Mrs. Knowles. Yeah. She's the best. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So, anyways, so, and I'll just share with you that I think this applies really in any area of life. If you're training in any area of life where you're trying to grow, if you stop and you think that you're where you need to be, you're gonna fall. Probably in business too. It's like Facebook. They don't just be like, oh, we have an awesome platform. It's like they're always trying to figure out the next thing to keep you in. Otherwise, TikTok's gonna like overtake them, or street. No, what's it called now? There's a new one. What's the new one called? That Clubhouse. I gotta play with Clubhouse sometime.
Oh yeah, I heard.
Okay, but if you don't keep innovating, you're gonna fade. Someone need to get in, or they're good. Oh,
I got it.
cool. Okay, so anyway, yes. So welcome. So the idea is that if you don't want to believe in yourself until the day you die, don't just be satisfied with where you are. Continue to strive for more growth. And I know for myself in my own journey, as I strove to, I went on my own spiritual journey starting in high school, where I kind of, I went through a process in where I ultimately became, I guess an observant, rabbi that you see today. I wasn't always like that. And I remember for myself as I was growing, there was a certain point where I had, started keeping Shabbos. I actually got injured. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but I was playing baseball at George Washington High School, starting catcher for, in a summer league there. And I was debating, should I play? Should I not? It was Shabbos, first game of the year, doubleheader. And ultimately, in like the second inning, I ended up tagging out a guy at home who spiked me. He cleated me, but I still tagged him out. It was awesome. And I have an amazing baseball story for you. Okay. I was pumped up. It's like, I was like, show me the ball. I'm like, here. He's like, he's out of there. I'm like, ugh. And then the pitcher threw me the ball, and it just like popped out of my glove. I couldn't catch anymore. So time blew. I play catch. I can no longer catch the ball. Pull off my glove. This thing turns pink. We drive to Rose Hospital and got an X-ray. I fractured my thumb. I was out for the year. And then from there on, I started keeping Shabbos. There you go. The next year, a year later, I was kind of in this mindset of wanting I wanted ultimately to take on more of the, traditional observances. And then I remember my last Chipotle as a big moment. December 31st, 2002. It was glorious.
That must have been the first Chipotle.
No. Man, it started here. Every day we went there. I showed them my student ID. They gave me a free soda. And then on Halloween and Thanksgiving, we dressed up like burritos and got free burritos.
Burritos.
So, anyway.
They actually are.
No. Okay. Anyway, times have changed. But so I thought, now as I entered college, I'm like, I'm good. I keep Shabbos, I keep kosher, like I'm there. I've arrived. I just felt myself with that mentality. I felt myself like just not feeling it. I didn't feel inspired. And I went to synagogue every morning, but in the Boston area, when it became fall, where it was like 10 degrees and winter, it's like that walk to synagogue became longer, and it was easy to sleep in. And I felt myself kind of like slipping. And ultimately, actually, Sarah went to seminary in Israel, and I realized like at that point I wanted to marry her. And I'm like, if she's going to be like studying, I got to step it up also. So ultimately, that like woke me up to continue my learning. But because I had I felt like I was there, like I really was slipping, and I felt myself like losing that inspiration. So for me, I felt this in a real way, like not to ever feel like content with where you are. This that I'm telling you is just in a spiritual context, but I think you could apply this in a lot of areas of life. And again, it's not to say you shouldn't be proud of yourself. You shouldn't be excited about your achievements and your accomplishments, but you should also always have that burning desire to be even better, to grow even more, to never be quite content with where you're holding. And I think that's a recipe for greatness, honestly. While taking immense joy in your accomplishments. So that's I think yeah.
I have a question about
Sure.
that. Like, what's your suggestion when you do feel like you're kind of at this like standstill and like it's not a good place to be, but you also like don't have that intrinsic motivation at the time, like how to get back into that.
Right. That's a great point. Right. So you have an answer? Yeah.
I would bring it back to like the community aspect of things, because community helps drive you. And so like whether it's like just coming to an event or two, or like figuring out something to do with like people around you, that always drives me to do more. Like there's a reason I'm doing 5-6 hours of learning a week instead of 3 now. It's because I'm doing it with everyone else. It's like a community thing.
Also, if ever there's something like, I have a daily habit of studying Talmud. Every morning, I wake up really early, I study, and I always like walk away like feeling refreshed. And I would say specifically that's what I was missing in my life at that point, was that habit of studying, of learning. Maybe we'll talk about this more on Shavuos, where we receive the Torah and we celebrate receiving the Torah, but it's this like wellspring of inspiration and wisdom and like awesomeness that, it really, the book of Psalms writes that Torah Hashem tamima mashivas nafesh, which means that the Torah of Hashem is so complete and pure that it consoles the soul. So it's like when you're feeling down and out, that sometimes you have a nice study session with a friend or a mentor or someone, that it can really uplift you. So for me, that's something personally that has worked for me to keep me like in the growth mindset. But yeah, as Kayla said as well, tapping into the community and feeling the love and support of them to to continue moving forward, I think could be helpful. But yeah, they also say just in the I studied about habits last year during the shutdown. I read a lot. I was reading about habits, and they say if you keep doing something, if you know it's good, even if you're not like feeling it, you just keep in that habit, and eventually you'll be able to maybe see, shift forward. If that makes sense. But excellent question. Yeah.
I feel like I'm stuck on this word believe, because believe has an aspect of hope in it, and to not believe in yourself and to not have hope in yourself seems really hard to me. And I'm just curious, like from the Hebrew, like, is that the translation is to believe?
Yeah, I mean, so we say, like, there's this word emunah, which means like belief, ma'amin, to believe. If it also has the same root as the word amen, which is like, it's interesting because that's to like say amen, like I'm validating that, I'm confirming that. So, and it's saying to not do this, to not do amin, to not do emunah. So maybe
Like a complete belief.
Maybe, in other words, maybe never be beyond a doubt. The way the Bartanura explains it is, don't ever think that you're infallible from slipping up or falling, which might be a different way to put it. He quotes that there's this great rabbi called Rabbi Yochanan, the high priest, who was the high priest for 80 years, and at the end of his life, he became a heretic. Of anyone to believe in himself and like, I'm solid, it can never happen to me, slipping up or whatever. Well, it did happen to him. So I think maybe if we look at that amin as like a confirmation, and you never feel like it's confirmed that I'm there. This thing, you just never know. So to always have in your mind that you are a human being who can slip, and have that humility, and then I think that's a healthy way to view it. Sarah is here, so she's going to begin momentarily. Just the last thing, I told you one more baseball story, and then we'll wrap it up. So this was awesome. Just about the value of truth. Truth is an important value. It says at the end of Pirkei Avos, in the previous chapter, it says the world exists for three pillars, really. One of which is truth. And my son, God bless him, Avrami, he's a truthful young man, and a very passionate, truthful young man. And it can be valuable, I'll tell you why, because he had his first baseball game yesterday, did great. And he was 2 for 2, 2 RBIs, 2 walks, a couple of great plays in the field, but who's counting? He made this play. He made this incredible play, whatever. At first base, he went all the way to his left, got the ball, raced back, got the guy out, at first base, threw the ball home. The catcher should have tagged him out. He was too slow, but really, Balikon should have turned a double play. Another amazing play he had was there a drop third strike. The catcher, dropped it, threw it to Avrami, bad throw. Avrami came and he tagged the guy who swerved out of the baseline. He tagged him out, but the ump was having a rough day. He said, safe. And I was looking at Avrami, and his reaction, he was like hurt by it. Because he was mad. He was like, what? Oh my God. He was animated, passionate, and he was upset. And the reason he was upset was because, and I told my dad, I'm like, if he's reacting like that, he's not putting on a show. He's not lying, trying to sell it to the ump to call him out. It's like, my little man is mad because he knows you tagged him out. And I'm like, ump, look at the kid. He knows you tagged him. It was annoying. So it's good to be truthful, because then in sport events like that, the ump should have known that, and he should have called him out just by my son's reaction, because he was so shocked that the truth did not emerge and that guy got safe wrongfully. So anyway, I digress. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to go now tend to the children. We're now home alone. I got back. He's 12. Okay. For 48 seconds. 48 seconds from now, I will be home as well. So, all right.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you all. Thanks so much. Take care. See y'all.
Hi guys.
And you're on Facebook.
Hi.
So.
Hi mom. Let me just hang up my visuals.
Yeah.
Do you need help? I think I got this. I'm really excited about these. Okay.
This one here. This one is.
I never got the email
Wait,
Yeah, I didn't get the email either.
for the survey.
you know what? I emailed him because it didn't work for me either. I wonder if it's down. I haven't heard back. I'll
Now he
double
has
check.
all our emails.
He
It
does.
doesn't even have.
It's fine. He just sends you interesting stuff.
Yeah, me too, but
Now he's gonna sell our emails.
No, but he'll sell like cool courses about, I don't know, self-knowledge and stuff.
It's good.
Yeah. Hi guys. So nice to see you. Okay, we have a lot to do. Like a really lot to do. If we don't finish, we'll just have to finish next week. And that's just how it's gonna go. So last week we talked about the first 3 spheros. This is the spheros chart. I know this is tiny. I couldn't find the awesome one I had last week. I know it's taken down. I think yeah. Anyways, it's fine. I used that one though for 2 weeks in a row, just for the record. But okay, so yeah, this is the spheros chart. Last week we focused on Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes, which correspond to 3 different personalities. If you're interested and you missed it, it's on Facebook, or it's in this awesome book, A Book About You by David Green. Okay. Okay, so then what we're going to do tonight, I'm so excited. First, though, this is also part of the exciting part, but it's harder for me because I think it's harder to understand. So I'm going to try to do this in a way where we can relate to it the most. And then we're going to go into this like whole other idea and talk about these pictures. Okay. So we went through, let's find them on the chart. We went through Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. Every chart and visual is different. These are like the top ones that deal with our intellect. These are the ones we did last week. So now we're just going to look at one of these last 4 and try to understand them. Okay. So in just summary, Chesed is giving without boundaries. Gevura is the opposite. It has a lot of boundaries. And when applied inwardly, there's also a lot of self-discipline. And like when God is Chesed, he's just like, it's like unending like growth and expansion. Like I think of spring and everything's like sprouting and growing, and there's rain, and rain is blessing. And but that's just my own thing. I don't know if that's I don't know. So Gevura is the opposite of that. And Chesed's the right arm, Gevura is the left arm. And then Tiferes is the balance of Chesed and Gevura. It's in the center here. And it's not just a combination of the 2, but using a combination of the 2, it's like its own trait. And we talked about last week how like a Tiferet person is very much like that mad professor profile. That's like the extreme of it, of like taped glasses, walking down the street in another world, thinking about like solving all the world's problems in your head. Like that's the Tiferet personality. So right, that's all in here and on Facebook to keep going with the different spheros. And I think that as we do this, I'm going to do a very, very short explanation of the other 4. And just think about if there's a time in your life where you feel like you related to that trait or you acted in that way. Because as I was going through it, that's why I was kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that time. So hopefully that works for you too. You can let me know. Okay, so Netzach. We're going to do Netzach next is over here. It's under Chesed. So it's that same right side of giving. And it's this, he says it's, so Netzach means dominance or eternity. And it's the physical representation of Chesed's expansive quality. These are all really hard to understand. I started bolding in my notes so I can make sure it's clear. And then I was like, oh no, I'm bolding the whole thing. Do you ever do that with your notes? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for all the nods. I love it. Yeah. Okay. So he says it's the dynamic force that propels creation and life forward. It's also in the aspect of God. It's how God moves through history, influencing and uplifting life. I think of it maybe as more like a more forceful type of chesed, of giving. It's expressed through, and this is what he says, leadership and imposing your view in a forceful way. having clear goals and striving to accomplish those goals. Does anyone ever relate to that? Like sometimes you just feel very driven. So I think about that, and also this is my own thing about like running my home, right? When I'm not here, I'm running my home. And there's like a lot to do with that. I'm not going to go into that. But it takes a lot, and I just feel like that imposing your view in almost a forceful way, in a gentle, forceful way, is part of parenting, right? And giving over values, not like in a really forceful way, but like giving over your values. Like you have to be strong in who you are to give that over, and having like goals. Supper needs to be done before the kids go to bed. Like when I'm like on it, like stuff like that. Okay, so moving forward then, so that's netzach. And netzach is this kind of like aggressive, a little bit like chesed, but aggressive. Okay, so then you go to hod, which is across from netzach on the chart. It's under gvura, which is strength. So hod is actually passive admission and acceptance of whatever challenge one faces. And like each one is such a beautiful aspect, right, to have within ourselves and in the world. Sometimes it's important to put up a fight, right? If the grocery store didn't put the ice cream in my trunk with the rest of my groceries now for the second time in a row, and today was my French fries also, which I don't even usually order, like it's time to call them. I could be nice about it, but it's time to like take action and do something. Whereas like hod, like the first time I was more hod. Okay, they missed one carton of ice cream. Like we can get over that. So I think that's like the best way of explaining hod, rather than taking the offensive, responding with empathy and strategies to keep the peace while just allowing the challenge to pass quietly. That's kind of like where you hide your face, like whatever it is, like pretend I'm not here, almost, in some scenarios maybe. Okay, yesod is then the one in the middle between netzach and hod. So just like tiferes is the balance between the two, yesod is also a balance between hod and netzach. But what is it exactly? So it's a perfect amount of giving for the need of the receiver without sacrificing anything of the giver. Okay? So like if I made a huge pot of soup and someone came over and I gave them dinner, that giving, I still have a huge pot of soup. Hopefully the dinner like was helpful for them, but then also like it really took nothing away from my huge pot of soup. Make sense? Okay.
Can you say that one more time?
With the soup?
No, what you said before the soup.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so it's a perfect amount of giving for the receiver, but it doesn't sacrifice anything on the amount of the giver, which this is really a truth. When you're giving and it's spiritual, when you give something, you don't have less, you have more, right? If you give money to like my kids' raffle, they'll be calling a lot of you, I think, for their school. So you're giving money for that, but it's not like you no longer have that money. Like giving money is like one thing that God says, like, test me, give, and you'll see you'll have more. And so it's not really taking away from the giver, because that's spiritual giving. That's like beyond the finite world. Okay, so the positive use, it's like positive using the physical world without getting pulled down by negativity and distraction, and stability. Like a lot of stability and internal spiritual strength is yesod. Okay, and then if you think about like, there's a lot of Kabbalah to this that like we talked about the first class, like God's light is white and then it's like filtered like a prism into the colors of the world. And the colors of the prism are kind of like all these different spheros and how God's light shines in the world. So it's like a filter. It's called Tzimtzum in Kabbalah. And that's like God had to pull back his presence in order to make room for all of us, but it like filters into the world. So it comes here through Malchus, which we're going to do next, and then Yesod, and then it goes through all the spheres. So you can also think of it as like a filter, kind of. So that's especially relevant because like Malchus is it the last or the first? I don't know. It's one of the filters. We'll get to it in a second. It's a vessel that receives all the upper spheros, all the other spheros. They come into Malchus. It's the last one that all these different colors, so to speak, come into before entering the world. So it really has this sense of humility and that it's able to just accept everything else as part of itself and bring that like vessel to bring that light into the world. It allows the physical, there's just another way to say that, allows the physical finite world to experience godliness. And it's represented on a person by the mouth, because the mouth, if you think about it, the mouth takes all our inner thoughts, feelings, like everything, and it brings it into reality through words into the world. So it's like there's a lot going on with the mouth, and it's like very interesting. There's a lot to it. We're not going to go into it now. Also, it's also represented by the feet. I was thinking of this as I was doing yoga this morning, right? Let your feet touch the earth. So Malchus is also represented by the feet. And if you think about it, it's that like touching of like the heavenly and the earthly. It's like that point in the middle. Okay, so Sara, we're going to come back to this later. Hopefully we'll get to it today. Sara, you may know the matriarch. So she represented Malchus, I heard. And the explanation was that it goes into, and we're going to like come back to this whole concept that I'll tie in later. But in the beginning of the parsha called Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah, it says Sarah lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. And it's this repetition of the word years. And there's a lot of commentary on what does that mean? Why is the word years repeated so many times about Sarah's life? And it's because she really used all her days to the fullest. So in this way, and how it's related to Malchus, is the pattern of her life, the way she used the days of her life, it led to her perfection. And she used them all for the good. And she had self-control, and she wasn't controlling others. No one controlled her. But I think another piece of it is that all these days that she used, it says in the commentaries, were equally good. Like, how could all these days of her life be equally good? Like the day her son, Yitzchak, was finally born when she was 90 years old, or the day that Paro took her into the palace, took her away from Abraham because she was so beautiful. Like, how can they be equally good? And it's this very special quality that we see in Sarah, that she was able to see the bigger picture, that each day wasn't just a day to itself. It was part of this cumulative life of hers, and she understood it was for something bigger, and there was a bigger purpose to everything. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. First, okay, so I really learned this from Rav Zav Leff, who was like, I heard him first week when I was in high school, and so inspired me, and it's just been so special getting to listen to him more and more over the years. So much wisdom to give over. Okay, so we're going to go back to Rabbi Akiva, and we're going to, first I just want to, this is something also new I heard that was really cool. Okay, so now we're switching gears. That was the Spheros. Now we're switching into this. Okay, we have until 8. Okay, we don't have very long. No, wait, I came at 7:40. So does that mean we have till 8:10?
Sure, we'll take it.
Okay, for you. Okay, okay, so there was 49 days leading up to the giving of the Torah, right? That corresponds to the 49 days of the Omer that we count in this period between Passover and Shavuos, which is coming in a few weeks, couple weeks, soon. So apparently on Rav Leff said that on day 49, Moshe said to God, please, can we have one more day? We're not ready yet. And so he asked a question. You've been preparing for 49 days. What's one more day going to do? Okay, so we're going to hopefully understand the answer by the end of that. But to keep that in mind, and then also Rabbi Akiva's students. So there's really 3 reasons. We talked about before how Rabbi Akiva's students died. 24,000 his students, they died during a plague during this time period. The plague ended on the 33rd day of the Omer. But we remember and we learn from them. And so the main reason that we learn about that they died was because they didn't respect each other. Okay, but there's always like more to the story, right? So there's a couple other reasons that are a little less famous. They come from the Midrash about what happened, what they did wrong. So one of them is that they didn't share their Torah with each other. Like they were learning and they didn't share it with each other. And then the other thing is that they didn't share it with the rest of the Jewish people. So why? Let's dig deeper and try to figure out what's going on. Okay, so the way science and general wisdom in the world works is, I just think about it in terms of electricity. But everything that's like invented and made is always based on whatever exists beforehand, right? So when GE wants to make a new light bulb, they're relying on what was already discovered and invented from Thomas Edison, right? And all the other like pieces of electricity that we know is a reality that work in our world. And they're taking it and they're basing off of that. So that's the way lots of wisdom works, is that you take what you have and you grow from it. And you learn more and more, okay? But when it comes to Torah, it's actually different. Why could it be different? Any ideas?
Because it's all already there.
Yes. Torah is revealed wisdom. It was given to us on Mount Sinai. Okay, so we started up here. But as the generations go on, we become just naturally further and further from the original revelation, from the generations that heard the Torah themselves, and it's passed down through another generation and another generation. So what happens sometimes is there's the next generations, they just, that's my Omer, it's always doing the same, it's fun. Okay. Sometimes what happens is the generations, they just follow, right? They become a little less close to that original giving of the Torah. But sometimes what happens is there is a big event or something where there becomes a bigger discrepancy between generations, and like the next generation is even farther than like otherwise in the pattern. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So like with the Holocaust being an example where like all those generations kind of got like wiped out, and like those source, like
Yeah.
like grandchildren.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely like, he quoted 3 examples. The Holocaust was one of them, and the other 2 were the destructions of each of the temples in Jerusalem, right? There was the first temple was destroyed, there was a second temple, and it was destroyed. And so the students of Rabbi Akiva were the first generation after the destruction of the temple. So there was a greater gap between them and the generation of the Torah giants before them. And they noticed this, and they felt this. So I'm just going with it, but I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. So if that's true, that they were in a lesser place than maybe what they expected, where they expected they should be based on previous generations, so then why, like, what's their mistake? What did they do so wrong? Okay. So this is what we want to explore. Life is not a competition, right? And the more I'm going to give an example. So when we pray for the temple to be rebuilt, okay, every generation, and we're all supposed to be praying for the temple to be rebuilt in Jerusalem. When we do that, it's like, why do my prayers matter? Like, look at all the great people before me, right? All the righteous Jewish women who are crying over their book of Tehillim, of Psalms, and all the great rabbis, and all the prophets, and Esther, and like everyone, like they all prayed for it, so why do my prayers matter? So when you look at it in terms of we're all like on, like it's more of a competition, all on the same level playing field, that's a very valid question. But the way it actually works, they say, is that every drop fills the jar, so to speak, more and more, and when it's full, then that's when the temple will be rebuilt. And the world will reach its perfection, and that's a whole nother class for another time. But just to explain the concept, it's like in kindergarten, you have the jar of marbles, right? And when people do good behavior, the jar is filled up. And then there's some people, maybe because of them, there's a lot of marbles in the jar. And some people, maybe their behavior only added very few marbles to the jar. But their few marbles are still extremely significant, because without them, you don't get to the top and get to the ice cream party as soon. So they're all really important. So before I'm going to tell you the answer, I'm going to tell you something else. Okay, so one day, there's so many little pieces that connect together. It's so cool, I think. One day, Rabbi Akiva's students were falling asleep. Okay, this is all like, I'm not making this up. I could not say these things. These things happened even 2,000 years ago. So they were falling asleep, and Rabbi Akiva was like, okay, like, what should he say to wake them up? So he tells them, Esther merited to rule over 127 provinces because Sara, right, like we were just talking about, lived for 127 years. They're like, what? Like, what does one have to do with the other? And when there's like numbers in Judaism, they're always connected. So what's the connection here? Esther was in a similar situation to Rabbi Akiva's students. She was in the first generation after the destruction of the first temple. So she could realize that where she was at in her wisdom, in her connection, was maybe a lot less than the generations before her. So why didn't she fall into the same mistake that Rabbi Akiva's students fell into? So we learn that Esther had a different outlook. She was able to muster up enough power within her to rule these provinces, but that doesn't happen from having low self-esteem. Okay, everything really ties back to self-esteem, and it's one of my favorite topics to teach about. She saw herself not as a vacuum, but as a continuation of all the people before her. Okay, so she wasn't just Esther standing here. She was standing on the shoulders of Sara, of our mother. And with that, see how it works? It's like when you're separate, everyone only reaches as tall as they are. When you stand on the shoulders of the people before you, you're so much taller, you're so much greater. And so she was able to realize that. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. This is great. Any questions so far? No? Yeah.
Didn't we say the Torah goes down?
Yeah.
Instead of building from what you were doing before.
Yeah. So our connection, the generations go down. Yeah. But because we're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us, if we see ourselves as just ourselves, then it's very reasonable to have very low self-esteem in our Jewish connection. But when we realize all the people who came before us and how we're connected to them, and they say, like, especially with the matriarchs and patriarchs, that anything they accomplished spiritually in their lives, any of these traits that they overcame, that became a part of their spiritual DNA, which they passed down to all their descendants. And that gave us the power within us. Like, we have their spiritual DNA. So when we connect back to the past, we're so much stronger. Okay, so let's go back.
Sorry, is that like the same thing with the Sphero? Like how we kind of have been working our way down to realize like what we're on top of, like the bottom one, Machos or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Interesting. I don't know.
Like it's not
Yeah.
really just like our feet. It's like what we're on top of. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I think sometimes like Malchus is like up here, maybe. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know enough about it
Yeah.
to be, but I think there's definitely everything's connected, and to the extent that we realize where we came from, and that like all these things are within us because those are the building blocks through which God created the world. Then, like through that also, we understand our own greatness. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay. Okay, where are we up to? So, fine. So Rabbi Akiva's students, the problem was that they saw themselves as individuals. They saw this generation gap, and they were troubled by it. They were really bothered. They didn't think that their Torah was worthwhile to be shared with each other and with others. They had low self-esteem regarding their learning. We see how dangerous it was because that's why they were taken from us. Can you imagine if the Torah would have like disseminated from Rabbi Akiva and his 24,000 students instead of what really happened is they all died and it came from 5 students? Like what we have today, the tradition of the oral Torah, was brought down through those 5 students. Like, to imagine what it would have been if there was 24,000 is just like, it's incomprehensible what impact that would have had on the future generations.
Sorry, so they
Yeah.
all died, and then he just taught 5 more.
He got right back up. He
Yeah.
gathered 5 new students and he taught them everything.
How
And
did he choose them?
that's a great question.
Well,
I
I
don't know.
guess he
But
did
one
that.
of them is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who's like known for the Kabbalah that's like Lag BaOmer and yeah. It's really powerful. Okay. Is this all making sense? I'm gonna make sure I didn't miss any of the pieces. Okay. So here's where we tie back in everything else, is that the Omer teaches us to count our days, to count our days cumulatively. The Omer is specifically the time period that we count. This is day 1, this is day 2, this is day 3, and every day really matters. It's not just one more day. It's a culmination of all the days before it. And all the spheros and what we learn in our character traits through the time of the Omer, it's not like this day we learn this and this day we learn that. It's all a culmination of the traits that we learned before that. So like the Omer, because we say a blessing, it's like such a, why is it? We say a blessing every day, but is it one mitzvah or is every day a separate mitzvah? But they're not all really separate mitzvahs, because like you're supposed to do all of them together for the mitzvah. So like it's kind of like this weird like discrepancy of why is it that way? And I think this explains it, is that really everything is about the culmination. In the counting of the Omer, in the generations, and in our character traits and how we're learning. Okay, then one more thing. Rabbi Akiva, he got married to Rachel, and she sent him to go learn. And he went and he learned Torah for 12 years. And then, does anyone know the story? And then what happened? He was on his way home. And a neighbor said to his wife, Rachel, like, how is it that your husband left you for 12 years to go and learn? Like, aren't you upset? And she says, not at all. I would send him for another 12 years. So what did he do? Rabbi Akiva was standing outside his house, his little hut, because that's all they had, living in the forest, poor. Even though she came from this wealthy family, she gave it all up for the Torah learning of her husband that she knew he was able to accomplish. And what does he do? He's outside, he hears her say that, and he doesn't knock on the door. He turns around and he goes right back for the next 12 years and learns. So like, why is that? He was right there, right? As like a romantic, that's so frustrating. See your wife, like you're right there. But it's all part of this idea of this culminative effect that 12 years plus 12 years, it doesn't equal 24 in the same way of 24 years learning does. That this continuation and this staying in it and staying like without interruption, and it all, right? Like the Omer is these days in a row. This is just a plug, this is an announcement. It's 8:11, so this is not actually part of the class. So it could be that we're gonna be starting a beginner service for Shabbos morning at BMH, and it might not be till the fall, and we barely talked about it, but that's my plan. But they say that it's supposed to be like, I think it's 8 weeks in a row, as opposed to once a month and every other week. And I was thinking about like, why is that? It's because when you're coming in for 8 weeks and you're in it and you're learning it together and with a group of people, and like, it makes such a bigger impact than if it's just sporadic here and there, right? Like if we do a program once a month, it's nice, you get to see people, but like, it's so much more when it's once a week and you get to see these people week after week. You're able to more quickly build a more meaningful relationship. And so too, right, when you see someone every day versus every week. That's why they say in dating, this is just a free tip. I learned this from one of my mentors. She says in dating, like how often are you supposed to go out and see each other? Every 3 days. It's like this really good balance between like you get time by yourself to reflect and to process and to miss the other person. But it's not like too much and it's not too little. You have to keep up the momentum, and that helps keep up the momentum, right? Because if a couple goes out like I don't know, once a month, and they're just getting to know each other, there's no momentum there. There's like, you can't even look forward to it. It's so far away. So may we all take these concepts and connect to the past that came before us. And now in our years and our days of our life, it's all cumulative. May we continue to grow and make decisions and everything that we've have and learned in the past to go higher and higher. Thanks, guys.
Can we come over with you?
Yeah, sure. Let me turn this off. Bye. Thanks for joining.